as tensions between the United States and South Africa continue to rise with the U.S. President Donald Trump's recent announcement to snub the G20 Leaders Summit hosted by South Africa in the coming weeks. Now, Trump's reasons include issues around South Africa's Land Expropriation Act and alleged discrimination and killing of Afrikaners. Now, this has sparked a debate on South African farming sector amid global trade tensions. Wandile Sihlobo is chief economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa and is here to help us unpack and address this narrative that we are currently hearing. A very good afternoon to you, Wandile, and thank you so much for your time. Just how important is it to dispel the false narrative, that South Africa's farming sector, for one, is under siege, given just how we have, as you've also penned it, seen its value more than double since 1994, and of course, exports too expanding?
Unati, land reform in South Africa since 1994 has actually been continuing on market-based principles, willing buyer, willing seller approach. There are no land confiscation or land grabs that are happening allowed by the government and targeting a particular group of South Africans. And secondly, the agricultural sector is not under siege. This is a sector that has actually been prosperous since 1994, having more than doubled in value, sustained a number of jobs, and now being the only African country in the top 40 global agricultural exporters. If we were under siege, we wouldn't be participating globally at such levels. And I think for us to retain that position, but also to ensure that many of our trading partners, they know that we are a prosperous agricultural sector. We have to be clear about that this sector is growing. And if anything, we are actually looking at it opening up as many export markets as we can. We are not under siege.
I want to go to your point that you're just raising now about other markets. But before I do that, perhaps let's talk about how this kind of narrative particularly is affecting your smallholder, your emerging black farmers, particularly, just navigating this layered, it would seem, crisis differently from, just your large-scale commercial farmers.
Look, it's no secret that South Africa is still a country of two agricultures. We have small-scale farmers and those that are participating in a commercial aspect. And of course, because of the history of our country, you have more black people on a small-scale farming side. But this is not something that we are not prepared to address. We have what we call the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan, which is not a government plan, but it is co-created by labor, business and government to say, how do we address all of this? And it tackles challenges value chain by value chain to ensure that we increase the participation of black farmers at a commercial level, while at the same time ensuring that those that are already commercial, they continue to prosper. And that's the goal and that's the plan that people are working on at this moment. But of course, if there are negative narratives that are associated with this sector, you always worry about the level of investments that people will place into this sector. Because if we are looking at this growth, that entails attracting more money to come into agriculture as well as its value chain. And doing that, it has to make sure then that the narrative and the story that we tell, as well as the actions that are happening in South African agriculture, are positive. Because the reality is this, it's not just a game of narrative, it's about telling the story of the actual truth that is happening. Then the actual truth is that this sector is growing and it still has more room to grow. How we will expand the pie and increase the participation of black farmers into a commercial level is also through some of the land that the South African government has bought. The South African government, as we speak today, is sitting with about 2.5 million hectares of land. That land must be transferred to black South Africans with title deeds, then partner with organized agriculture to bring the necessary skills, and thereafter the aspects of financing, blended finance and the other instruments, and make sure we select the beneficiaries appropriately. And I think in doing that, we will grow the agricultural pie and we will deal with the inclusivity issues. And of course, the exports gets to be an added factor because all of what we produce, part of it has to go to export markets. We already export about half of what we produce. So in our effort to expand the output, we will have to make sure that it goes to the export markets, and everyone will benefit on that directly and indirectly.
Yeah, I want to talk about those, markets then, just on the economic and global context. From your vantage point, I mean, how have these global tensions that we are seeing, particularly the conflicts in your Eastern Europe, the Middle East, how is that reshaping South Africa's agricultural input costs and export competitiveness? I mean, you've spoken about the need to look at other avenues in which to grow the sector.
I mean, on the aspect of the inputs, we are quite exposed to all of these things. Remember, Unati, South Africa imports about 80% of its fertilizer and 98% of the agrochemicals. So when there are disruptions in the value chains or there are geopolitics affecting some of these, we get to be at a position where we are on the coalface of some of these. But the efforts of the South African farming sector and the agribusinesses, I think we've been able to navigate that path reasonably well, to an extent that if you look at where agriculture is today, for 2025, we think the sector will grow by over 8%, the gross value added. Last year, our agriculture exports reached a record $13.7 billion US dollars. For 2025, at Agdes, we think the exports will cross the $14 billion US dollars mark for the first time. And we think that then if we continue in that path of ensuring that the exports are open so that all of the surplus that we have, the farmers can be able to channel it to the right markets so that we remain quite profitable. And the important part here, Unati, is that as much as we talk about the exports, we are not exporting all of the products while we leave South Africans without food. We ensure that at a national level, there's sufficient supplies domestically. And then the surplus is the one that goes to export markets. The geopolitics are reshaping to an extent which markets are we going to. We face difficulties in the US with the tariffs that are there, but at the same time, we have accelerated our effort to reaffirm our commitment to strengthening our exports to the EU, which accounts for about 20% of our exports, the African continent, where half of our exports go to, and of course, widening the room of our exports in the Middle East as well as Asia. We see Asia and the Middle East as the areas that hold much more growth potential for us in expanding our exports for the near future while retaining what we have in Europe, the UK, and elsewhere.
Wandile, we're fast running out of time. I want to ask you this question, but I'm going to park it for the sake of the medium-term budget policy statement for 2025 that's going to be heard, of course, and delivered by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana on Wednesday, on the 12th of November. Very quickly, your expectations, and maybe just touch also on investor confidence in South Africa's agricultural sector as we do so.
The sentiment in South African agriculture is positive. One can look at the AgBiz IDC Agribusiness Confidence Index, whereby for the last 3 quarters, it has been remaining at reasonably robust level. We have challenges, foot and mouth disease, municipalities that are not delivering well. All of those must be addressed, but sentiment in general remains quite robust in the South African farming sector.
Wandile, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Wandile Sihlobo is the Chief Economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa.